Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. The power cut out mid-sentence. 1 second I was presenting numbers to a client, the next my screen went black. I am Alex and I was 29 when this happened. When I spun around, my father-in-law was still leaning on the power strip. I yanked off my headset and just stared at him. He kept his hand on the switch like he was proud of it. On the desk, my phone buzzed with messages from my boss. Rick finally let go and said the room looked better without all that waste. I had been halfway through closing a deal worth my rent. If that client bylaid, my month went straight into panic mode. I waved my hands at the dark monitor like I could will it back. Rick just crossed his arms and watched me scramble, like this proved a point. I know how this sounds now, some spoiled guy crying over Wi-Fi. Back then it felt like he had yanked the rug under my job. Rick is my father-in-law in his late 60s, full of speeches about toughness. Any small thing can set him off, and apparently tonight it was power strips. "What are you doing right now, Rick?" My voice came out sharper than I planned. "I had a live client hanging there and you killed it. You can call them back, the bill is what matters. Our people never burn money like that." My wife stepped into the doorway with a plate in her hands. She watched us like someone watching a storm drift too close. Rick, he was in the middle of something important. That call really was important, even if he could not see it. Nothing on that screen is worth wasting the whole grid. I grabbed my phone and saw the messages stacking up fast. "You froze on us, everything okay on your end?" I typed out some excuse about a blown fuse and hit send. Even writing it, I felt myself shrinking, like I was 12 again. Rick watched me with this calm, judgmental look that made my skin crawl. He pointed at the dark monitor like it had offended him personally. "You people leave things humming all day, then cry when the bill comes. We turned things off when we left a room. We did not need a whole spaceship blinking to talk to someone." He loved that phrase, and he used it like a weapon that night. I wanted to yell that my job literally existed on that spaceship. Instead, I rebooted the router and watched the lights crawl back. The client had already emailed my boss asking to reschedule. I could almost feel my next review sliding down a grade fast. Rick muttered something about consequences while my chest tried to climb out. We made it to dinner like nothing had happened, at least outside. Inside, I was still on that call, frozen in front of strangers. Rick carved into his food and launched into his favorite topic. Kids these days do not know how to stretch a dollar. His eyes kept drifting to the hallway where my office sat. He started counting little sins on his fingers while everyone pretended to chew. Streaming subscriptions and food deliveries and gadgets that stay plugged in all night. By the time he got to my second monitor, I felt my jaw clench. We lived like kings, pretending we were struggling. No one answered, and the silence made his words hang heavier. My wife brushed his hand away from the salt and changed the subject. "So how was your day, Rick?" It had been a long day, according to him. "Everywhere I look I see waste." I felt her foot tap my ankle under the table, a plea to drop it. I swallowed what I wanted to say because I knew the script. If I pushed back, he would dig in harder and louder. Then we would spend the night pretending it was all fine. I told myself it was just one stupid scene. Looking back now, that was the moment the ground really shifted. After dinner, Rick did his usual patrol, only harsher this time. He clicked off the hallway light behind me before I even cleared it. He turned the thermostat down 2 degrees and smiled at the tiny victory. He unplugged the coffee maker and left the cord hanging like a warning. Every move felt like a small punishment wrapped as responsible living. I went back to my office and reopened the presentation he had killed. My inbox held the reschedule email, polite but distant in tone. My boss added a short line asking if everything was stable at home. Rick leaned on the doorframe again and watched me like a warden. "You will thank me when you see the next power bill." I spun my chair toward him and forced my voice to stay level. "My whole career depends on this setup. If I look unreliable, they can replace me with someone cheaper." He shrugged like I was talking about a hobby and not a paycheck. "Real work does not vanish when the lights go out." He turned away before I could answer and walked toward the garage. For a second, I thought he might flip the breaker again. Instead, he opened the interior door and stepped through before pulling it shut. I heard the click of the deadbolt and felt that sound in my teeth. At the time, I brushed it off as another control thing. Now it feels like the RST real warning. I sat there in the half-quiet house and watched the router lights blink. Every tiny flicker made me think of his hand on that strip. I told myself I could live with a little nagging to keep peace. I did not know yet how much he was really hiding behind that locked door. The banging started while I was still under the shower. 3 heavy hits on the door, quick and angry. "That is too long in there." His voice came through the wood, sharp and way too pleased. The water went cold a second later, like he had pulled a lever. I shut it off and stood there dripping, heart climbing fast. Towel around my waist, I opened the door crack. Rick was right there with a sticky note and a marker. He slapped the note on the mirror like a ticket on a windshield. 5 minutes max, written in huge letters right next to my reflection. I stared at the words, then at his face behind me. He looked calm, almost satisfied, like this was responsible leadership. "Showers eat the bill, you do not need a spa every morning." He tapped the glass and walked out before I could breathe. I remember thinking this was a one-time stunt, not a system. It did not stop in the bathroom. By the time I reached the kitchen, he was already at the outlet. He yanked the plug from the coffee maker while it was still running. The stream sputtered to a stop, almost overflowing the mug. "You make what you drink, no more idle power flow." My jaw clenched on pure reflex, but I kept my voice flat. "You cannot just pull plugs without warning." He set the cord down with slow, exaggerated care. "This house needs discipline, not constant leakage." The word discipline hung there like we were at boot camp. That afternoon, he gathered us in the living room like a briefing. No couch slouching, no casual tone, just a little clipboard. "From now on, this place follows new limits. Short showers, strict temperature, lights off unless needed." He talked about it like we were soldiers and he was saving the army. I watched his pen move as he listed categories to control. Water, electricity, groceries, trash pickup. Each item already had numbers in his head, I could see it. He was not brainstorming, he was imposing. My chest tightened because my job sat in every digital line of that list. Days after that felt like living with a roaming inspector. He would glide through the hallway and tap switches off behind me. He would pause by the thermostat and adjust it down 2 clicks. Every change came with a tiny satisfied nod, like a point scored. I started catching myself tensing whenever I heard his footsteps near that panel. One night I reached for the control and his hand landed over mine. "Careful, this thing burns money while you sleep." I pulled my hand back because the contact felt like a warning. My wife watched from the couch, eyes locked on the remote. I pretended it was nothing, but my shoulders stayed tight the rest of the evening. Food was next on his mission chart. I ordered delivery after a long shift just to make life easier. He spotted the driver through the window and almost laughed. "Of course you called someone to bring you dinner, why move at all?" He followed the bag into the kitchen like it was evidence. I unpacked the containers, already annoyed, already tired of the commentary. He opened one, looked at the portion, and shook his head. "You pay triple for this, then complain you are broke." The worst part was my wife shrinking behind him, like she agreed by default. I tossed my keys harder than planned, just to hear something that was not his voice. He started writing numbers on the whiteboard by the fridge. "Takeout this week, streaming services, coffee pods." Everything had a dollar amount stacked next to it. He circled the total and underlined it twice, like a teacher grading. I watched my life turned into a list and felt smaller than that marker. The fridge incident hit a special nerve. I came home one evening and heard a slow, annoying beep. The door looked shut, but the display flashed a warning code. Inside, the air felt wrong, not chilled enough, just vaguely cool. Half our groceries were limp or sweaty, ready for the trash. I called out for my wife, voice already raised. She rushed in, saw the shelves, and covered her mouth. Behind us, Rick walked in with a dish towel slung over his shoulder. "Relax," I pulled the plug for a while to knock off the ice. He delivered it like he deserved thanks for the ruined food. I pulled the fridge away from the wall and checked the outlet. The cord still hung loose, like he had only just decided to fix it. How long was it unplugged? Long enough to lower the bill this month. He crossed his arms, as if that explained every soft tomato sitting there. My wife snapped at him then, sharper than I had ever heard. You cannot touch appliances without telling us. Her hands shook as she lifted a leaking package into the bin. That is our money you just threw away, T. Oh, chase a smaller statement. He opened his mouth to argue, then shut it when he saw her face. We dumped almost everything and wiped the shelves in tense silence. I kept doing mental math, adding up what we had lost in minutes. His big victory probably saved a tiny slice of one bill. Our week of meals now sat in a trash bag at our feet. The smell hit first, then the anger settled in behind it. Later that week, he took control of the trash itself. I dropped a Tide bag by the back door before heading to my desk. By the time I passed again, he was crouched over it with scissors. He had opened it and was digging through leftovers with bare hands. Look at this, still good pieces mixed with scraps. He waved a half-eaten slice at me like a flag. You throw away money, then wonder where it goes. My face burned not because he was wrong about the slice. It was the way he talked to me, like a reckless teenager. I wanted to grab the entire bag and hurl it straight past him. Instead, I stood there and swallowed every comeback. He sorted containers into stacks, muttering about portion control. I realized I was scared to speak, not just annoyed. Because every argument with him became a marathon I could not finish. So I walked away, and that cowardly retreat still bothers me now. The rules multiplied. He taped notes to light switches, to the laundry basket, to the pantry. Short phrases all about using less, paying less, needing less. Our place began to feel like a training camp run by anxiety. Every corner had his handwriting watching us, telling us what not to do. Around the same time, the phone started ringing more often. Unknown numbers, different area codes, usually mid-afternoon. If I reached for it, he would appear from nowhere and grab it first. He would answer in a cheerful tone that never matched his eyes. Then he would wander into the garage and close that door behind him. The first time I actually picked up one of those calls, it was an accident. He was outside messing with the sprinklers, the line buzzed on the counter. I hit accept without really thinking, still focused on an email. A clipped voice asked for Richard by full name, with an account number. They mentioned a balance and a due date before I could respond. My stomach lurched because this did not sound like some normal reminder. I started to ask what account they meant, but Rick burst through the doorway. Who is that? Let me handle it. He took the phone from my hand with a grip that actually hurt. He turned away and walked out again, tone dropping to a harsh whisper. That was the moment his crusade stopped feeling like pure control. It started to look more like panic dressed up as morality. He cut back our showers and food, yet someone else wanted cash from him. He had turned our daily life into a budget sermon while hiding his own numbers. I did not know the scope yet, but the cracks were no longer hairline. That night at dinner, he pushed his plate away early. We need everyone on board with this tightening, he announced. No more surprise bills, no more pointless spending, no more laziness. My wife and I traded a look that said we heard something new. For the first time, his voice shook slightly on the word bills. I lay awake later, staring at the dark shape of the doorway. Somewhere beyond that hall, his locked garage and those secret calls waited. Every sticky note in the house pointed at us as the problem. But the real mess, whatever it was, sat on his side of the ledger. The proof would show up soon enough, folded in a bright envelope with my name on the mailbox. I almost tossed the red envelope with the grocery ads. It slipped from the bundle and landed face up on the counter. Bright block letters across the top yelled "Past due" in my direction. My pulse jumped before I even saw the name printed below. It was addressed to Rick, not to me, which somehow felt worse. I told myself to set it aside and mind my own business. Instead, my thumb traced the amount on the front like an idiot. It was not small, not something you forget to pay once. A line underneath mentioned storage fees and an account in arrears. I knew that phrase only from movies, and it still hit hard. I slid it open with the edge of a spoon because I was shaking. I know how that sounds now, snooping through another adult's mail. Back then it felt like survival, not curiosity. There was a full page inside listing months of missed payments. At the bottom, one sentence about a scheduled auction if nothing changed. I read it twice, then a third time, hoping I misread. The letter named a storage facility across town, with his unit number. The balance sat in bold near the center like a warning light. My stomach flipped because this was not some phone plan issue. This was a slow-moving disaster that had finally sent paperwork. The front door opened while the paper was still in my hand. I stuffed the whole thing back into the envelope. So fast it crinkled. Rick walked in with reusable bags hooked over his arms. He saw the color of the envelope on the counter and froze. His eyes went flat in a way I had not seen before. "You sorting the mail now?" He set the bags down with more force than needed. "Just trying to get the coupons out of the way." My voice came out too quick, a little too bright. He picked up the envelope, felt the broken seal, and looked at me. For a second, I thought he was going to blow up. Instead, his jaw flexed once, then he slid it into his jacket. "Bank junk, nothing you need to worry about." He forced out a short laugh that did not reach his eyes. Then he went straight into the garage and turned that lock again. I stood there listening to the click of the deadbolt echo down the hall. Part of me wanted to follow him and ask straight out. Another part pictured him snapping and packing our stuff that same day. So I did what I do way too often with him. I stayed quiet and pretended my hands were not still trembling. When my wife came home, I handed her the grocery receipt. She skimmed it, then saw my face and stopped joking about prices. "What happened?" I told her about the red envelope, but only the outside details. Even that tiny piece made her shoulders tense up. "Storage, huh?" Her eyes went to the closed garage like she could see through it. "He has a small unit somewhere for old tools and keepsakes." The way she said it told me she was reciting something she had heard often. I asked if she had ever been there, and she shook her head once. "He likes his space." She tried to brush it off, but her voice had gone thin. "He keeps extra stuff off-site so the house stays tidy." She used the same careful words he used during his lectures. I realized this was one of his stories she had never questioned. The next afternoon, another unknown number flashed across the screen. Rick was out back talking to a neighbor about sprinkler schedules. I watched the phone ring, then slide toward voicemail. My thumb moved on its own and hit accept before I thought. The same clipped tone as before greeted me with his full name. The caller started listing digits and a past due balance. They referenced the storage account I had seen on that notice. My head went light because now the paper had a voice attached. I managed to get out that he was not available at the moment. They reminded me about an auction date and repeated the amount slowly. After the call, I just stood there staring at the blank screen. There was no way to pretend this was harmless anymore. He was not trimming expenses and living clean, he was sinking. All those speeches about our wasteful habits now tasted different. They felt like smoke cover for his own mess in some rented room. He came inside a few minutes later, brushing grass from his hands. "Anyone call?" I swallowed because lying would be simple and awful. Some company about a storage unit, they mentioned an overdue balance. His whole posture tightened before he forced a smile into place. "Wrong number, they keep mixing me up with another client." He grabbed the phone and checked the recent log too fast. "We should block them, they are scammers." My wife had walked in during that line and paused near the table. The silence from both of us made his explanation sound even thinner. That night I lay awake replaying every rant about our spending. His moral high ground shrank with every ring of the phone in my memory. I kept seeing that one word from the letter, auction, in my mind. Who lets things get that far while preaching about discipline all day? The hypocrisy hurt more than the money he might owe. A few days later, the second letter arrived when he was out. Same facility logo at the top, same bold account number. This one was worse, though not in size but in detail. In the middle of the page, they spelled out the sale date. They even listed the time they would cut his lock off. My wife found me at the counter with the paper spread out. Her eyes went straight to the circled figures and underlined section. You opened it. I nodded and waited for her to call me out. She did not, which told me she understood exactly how scared I was. They are going to sell everything in there if he does not pay. I tapped the date with my finger until the skin reddened. They will toss his stuff on the curb, maybe on some website. She read the letter from top to bottom without saying a word. When she finished, she exhaled like she had been holding air all week. He told me that place was just souvenirs and a few boxes. Her hands rested flat on the counter, knuckles gone pale. You do not rack up this kind of bill for dusty junk. I could hear something breaking in her voice as she spoke. For the first time, she looked more betrayed than defensive. We stood there fighting with our own thoughts in the quiet kitchen. Is it wrong to go there? I asked it out loud before I could stop myself. He can't. P.S. This secret, but he lives under our roof. If he loses that unit, who do you think deals with the fallout? She wiped under one eye with the heel of her hand. I never wanted to be that person snooping, checking up on him. But I also do not want a truck dropping his chaos at our door. We can at least see what it is before we decide anything. The way she said we told me I was not alone in this anymore. We copied the address and unit number off the page. I folded the letter until it was small enough to hide in my wallet. The whole time I expected him to walk in and catch us. My chest buzzed like I had chugged 3 energy drinks on an empty stomach. We moved the original envelope back into the pile like nothing happened. For the next few days, he became obsessed with reaching the mailbox first. He would slip outside right after breakfast and pretend to stretch his legs. If I drifted toward the front door, he appeared with some excuse. Need help carrying something? Want to see this tool? Did you adjust the thermostat? Every distraction landed right when the postal truck rolled up. Watching that pattern only made my decision feel more solid. Whatever sat in that storage unit scared him more than any of our bills. He could ignore his own account while ripping apart ours to save pennies. That contrast kept me angry enough that the guilt quieted down. I told myself that if he wanted privacy, he should not gamble with our stability. The morning we chose to go, he left early for some errand. My wife watched his car turn the corner, then grabbed her keys. We did not talk much on the drive, just short questions. Do we tell him if we go? Not yet, not until we know what we are walking into. I pulled into the lot listed on the notice and killed the engine. The place looked quiet from outside, just rows behind a tall fence. My mouth felt dry and my hands kept tightening on the steering wheel. We could still leave and pretend we lost the letter in the trash. Instead, we sat there staring at the entrance gate, knowing the next move would change how we saw him forever. I pushed the car door open before I could lose my nerve. Gravel crunched under my shoes as I walked toward the gate. My hands felt weirdly light, like they did not belong to me. Behind me, my wife closed her door and fell into step. We both stared at the keypad like it might yell at us. You have the letter. She tapped my pocket with 2 fingers, quick and tense. I pulled it out, folded small, already soft from handling. The notice had a temporary access code near the bottom. I typed it in and the gate slid open with a slow drag. We crossed the lot and headed for the small office near the entrance. Inside, a man at a desk glanced up from his screen. Morning, you folks here to rent or to clear out? The word clear hit me harder than it should have. I set the letter on the counter and turned it so he could read. His eyes moved over the account number, then down to the balance. He did a little double take at the total, then checked again. You related to Richard? My wife nodded, though her face barely moved at all. The guy exhaled through his nose like this was not his first mess. He clicked around on his monitor, jaw tightening as he scrolled. Yeah, this one has been sliding for a while. He pointed at the screen, then caught himself and stopped. We tried calling, mailing, everything. There is a sale on the books. My throat felt dry hearing that from someone who was not a collection voice. Is there any way to look inside before that happens? My wife's voice came out low but steady. We are not trying to steal anything, we just need to know. He studied us for a second, probably weighing drama versus policy. Finally, he grabbed a ring of keys and motioned toward the hallway. Technically, the unit belongs to him until the auction goes through. His tone stayed neutral, but I heard a warning under it. I can unlock the company lock so you can inspect. Nothing leaves without paperwork, and the clock does not stop. Every word felt like a countdown echoing in that narrow corridor. We walked between rows of metal doors, each with its own padlock. Our footsteps bounced back at us, too loud in the tight space. The manager checked numbers as we moved, lips moving silently. He stopped halfway down and tapped the one that matched the letter. There it was, our family secret, behind a door already marked for sale. 2 locks hung from the latch, one old and scratched, one newer. He pointed at the newer padlock and fished out the right key. This one is ours, means the account is seriously behind. He slid the key in, turned it, and removed the company lock. My stomach did that slow drop you get on a bad elevator. You sure you want to see this? He looked between us, not unkind, just honest. Some folks think they are walking into a small closet. Then they realize it is their whole life in a hallway. We both nodded because eking out now would haunt us. He grabbed the bottom of the door and jerked it upward. The metal rattled as it rolled, loud in that near row. I braced for dust and cardboard, something boring, something simple. Instead, my breath snagged halfway in my chest. The unit was crammed full, stacked from floor to ceiling. There was no clear path inside, just piles leaning on piles. Boxes sagged against plastic bins and wobbling furniture. Random electronics balanced on top of each other like bad Tetris. Loose items wedged into any open space, even between the rafters. It looked less like storage and more like an avalanche frozen mid-fall. I know hoarding clips go viral online all the time. Sitting here writing this, I sound dramatic even to myself. But standing there, it felt worse than anything I had scrolled past. Because every random thing in that room had a dollar sign attached. Every dollar in there had been used to lecture us at home. My wife pressed a hand against the metal frame to steady herself. He told me this was a small locker with a few keepsakes. Her voice cracked on the word small, which hurt in a new way. The manager just watched, letting the silence do its work. The air felt heavy, like we had stepped inside his favorite lie. We picked our way forward, testing each spot before shifting weight. A chair blocked the entrance, buried under clothes and gadget boxes. I nudged it aside with my knee, and something slid free. A brand new power drill in its case clattered to the concrete. Behind it I saw another drill, same brand, still in shrink wrap. My brain tried to add that up while my chest tried not to explode. He hassled me for leaving a light on, while paying to store duplicates. I crouched and lifted the nearest box, ignoring the dust coating it. Inside were kitchen appliances in perfect shape, some still taped shut. We had been living with his rules around energy while this sat here. My wife moved toward a plastic tub stacked near the back wall. She tugged the lid up and stared for a long second. What is it? Clothing, stacks of it, most with price tags dangling. She pinched one between her fingers and read the date printed near the barcode. These are from years ago. Her voice sounded distant, like she had stepped away from herself. He told me we could not afford decent winter stuff that year. She let the fabric drop and it bunched up on top of more. I could not tell if she was about to shout or collapse. The manager cleared his throat softly at the door. Look, I am not here to judge, you are not the first family. But this unit has been active for a long time. He flipped through a clipboard and pointed at a line for us. Monthly rent, late fees, penalties, all lined up in a growing column. How long has this been going on? I sounded calmer than I felt. The account started over a decade ago, and it never fully caught up. He tapped another line, this one showing the peak balance last year. I did the math in my head and felt like I had been punched. That is easily a small used car, maybe more, gone into this room. Into keeping junk under lock and key instead of clearing it. And at home, we were arguing over shower length and thermostat settings. My guts twisted not just from anger but from the stupid unfairness. This was not stinginess, this was a habit he had chosen to hide. My wife leaned against a stack of bins and slid down a little. I thought he was careful, she whispered. I really believed it. He told us stories about stretching every dollar in his 20s. She stared at the cluttered wall as if it might talk back. Her whole childhood narrative just cracked in front of both of us. I wanted to tell her it would be fine, that we would manage. The truth sat in front of us and refused to be softened. Every unpaid invoice, every collector call pointed straight to this door. He had not been saving money, he had been burying it. And now strangers were scheduled to paw through the wreckage for deals. The manager offered us a printed breakdown from his computer. I took the sheet, fingers leaving faint smudges on the edge. Payment history, or what passed for one, filled most of the page. Long gaps where nothing came in, then small random amounts. Like he had tossed in whatever he could without fixing the problem. If someone brings this account current before the sale, the auction stops. The manager kept his tone practical, like discussing a phone plan. It does not erase the pattern, but it keeps the stuff off the block. He looked between us, waiting to see if money would appear. I felt my jaw tighten because I knew exactly what we could not cover. We cannot take this on, not like that, my wife said. Her hand shook as she traced the total at the bottom. We are already stretched, he knows that, he still did this. I heard more hurt than rage, which somehow cut deeper. If we bailaid him out quietly, we would be signing up forever. Could we at least pull out documents, anything critical? I turned back toward the chaos, hunting for a practical angle. The manager checked the clock above the hallway and nodded once. ID, legal papers, family photos, that sort of thing, keep it quick. Nothing else leaves until the account is straight, that is the rule. So we started digging, each of us choosing a different direction. I moved toward a set of plastic drawers near the side wall. The handle broke off in my hand, brittle from age and pressure. Inside, I found envelopes, old statements, and unopened bank mail. Some were from the same company that had called the house. My wife worked through a stack of small boxes near the front. And when she found a scattered pile of gift cards and receipts, she fanned them out, squinting at the print on each one. Most had low balances scribbled on the back in his handwriting. Little leftover amounts he could not bring himself to use or throw. It hit me that this was his pattern everywhere. He could not let go of anything half-used, no matter the cost. So he paid monthly rent to trap his leftovers in a steel closet. Then turned around and accused us of wasting money on convenience. I felt this ugly mix of disgust and sympathy eat at my patience. Near the back right corner, a stack of small crates leaned dangerously. I climbed onto an upside-down milk crate and reached for the top one. My fingers brushed a crate lip and the whole column shifted. My wife gasped and I threw my weight back to steady it. A box slid off the side and burst open near my feet. Out spilled a mess of unopened electronics, still in plastic. Chargers, routers, small speakers, things he could have sold easily. I picked one up and turned it over, reading the label on the back. Not cutting edge, but not relics either, still worth something. Instead of listing them, he had paid years of rent to ignore them. We cannot sort all this today. My wife wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist. We need proof, at least, something we can show him later. Something he cannot argue away with one of his speeches. So I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. I snapped wide shots of the whole space, then closer angles. Rows of duplicate tools, stacks of still-tagged clothing, electronics everywhere. I captured the printed statement the manager had handed us. Each photo felt like another nail in a story he had built carefully. Part of me felt filthy for documenting it, the rest felt relieved. You plan on confronting him with all this? The manager watched me with a tired kind of understanding. We cannot live with his rules while this sits here. I lowered the phone and met his eyes, trying to sound steady. If we stay quiet, he keeps driving us into the ground. He nodded once, like he had heard that speech before from others. Just remember, folks in deep denial can get mean when cornered. He slid the printed sheet into a clear sleeve and tapped it. You have until the date on there before we start cutting locks. After that, everything in this cave goes to the highest bidders. We spent a few more minutes pulling anything clearly irreplaceable. A box of old photos, a small fireproof safe with a key taped on. Some folders with tax records, because those could wreck us later. We stacked them near the door, keeping our movement as careful as possible. Even that tiny pile felt heavy, like we were stealing from a sick person. My wife paused at the edge of the unit and looked back inside. He is going to lose his mind when he finds out we came here. Her voice shook, but there was steel under it now. He is also going to lose everything in here if we do nothing. She straightened up and stepped aside so the manager could close it. The metal door rattled down, cutting off the view in one motion. The manager slid the facility lock back through the latch. It clicked shut with a small final sound that still rings in my memory. I realized my hands were clenched so tight my fingers hurt. We followed him back down the long hallway, feeling like we had aged. At the office counter, he set the clear sleeve between us. There are payment plans, but they only work if he actually commits. He needs to call me, not duck every contact like he has been. He pushed a business card across the surface with 2 fingers. I slipped it into my wallet next to the folded notice. We walked out into the bright parking lot and stopped near the car. My wife leaned on the roof and let out a long, uneven breath. I do not know whether I want to scream at him or hug him. Both feelings sat there ugly and real in the same cramped space. Neither of us felt ready for what would happen when this came out. On the drive home, the silence felt louder than any argument. I kept running through possible conversations in my head. None of them ended calmly, not with what we had just seen. Every version led to either denial or a complete meltdown. I gripped the steering wheel and felt the weight of each mile. What do we tell your mom? The question hung between us for several blocks. She deserves to know, but do we drop it all at once? If we tell her now, she might warn him and he buries deeper. If we wait, the auction could hit before anyone is ready. We finally agreed on one thing by the time we turned onto our street. We would not pay that bill in secret and pretend nothing happened. We would not cover for him while he kept preaching at us. Any help we gave would come with brutal honesty attached. Even thinking that felt harsh, but also like the only sane boundary left. As we pulled into the driveway, his car was already parked there. My heart skipped that stupid uneven beat again. He was home early, moving bags from his trunk into the garage. The same private garage that matched the chaos we had just walked through. My wife and I exchanged a quick look that said everything and nothing. We climbed out, trying to look normal, trying not to show our visit. He lifted a hand in a casual wave, then quickly shut the interior door. I heard the familiar click of the lock, sharper now that I knew. Inside that door was one level of control. Across town sat the real mess. And we were the only ones holding the full picture, at least for the moment. I set the printed balance sheet beside my plate instead of a napkin. The paper looked louder than the whole crowded table. My phone stayed in my pocket, heavy with photos from the unit. Across from me, my wife stacked rolls on a plate with shaking hands. We were both waiting for the same explosion and pretending to smile. Rick stood up and tapped his fork against his glass. Everyone quieted down in that trained family way. I felt my pulse jump against the collar of my shirt. He lifted his drink and gave a little nostalgic smile. I already knew where his speech would go, and I still let him start. He opened with gratitude, of course. Grateful for family, for health, for having a roof. I watched his eyes wander around the table, touching each face. He talked about hard times and making things stretch in the old days. The usual warm-up before he took a swing at us. Back then we made 1 chicken last 3 days. Back then we did not whine about comfort, we just worked. His voice got louder as he moved into familiar territory. You kids think money is pretend numbers on a screen. You burn through it on gadgets and lazy conveniences and streaming junk. I felt my teeth pressed together hard enough to hurt. He gestured toward my end of the table without looking at me. DoorDash subscriptions, 2 monitors in a home office. He dragged each word out like exhibit labels in a trial. My uncles nodded along, not knowing the other evidence in my pocket. My wife shifted in her chair and met my eyes. Do we do this now? Her look asked, or let it pass again? Rick cleared his throat and went for his favorite line. My generation would never torch money like this one does. We respected every dollar, every drop of power, every last crumb. That was it. The last straw, the final shove, whatever you want to call it. My hand moved before my brain finished voting. I picked up the statement and laid it in front of my plate. The paper landed with a soft smack that still felt loud. Rick paused mid-sentence and frowned down the table. What is that? Just something about respecting every dollar. My voice sounded calm, which did not match my heartbeat. I slid the sheet onto the clear space in front of me. My mother-in-law reached for it first, fingers hesitant. Her mouth moved silently as she traced the lines. She flicked her gaze up once, then went back to the page. She hit the total at the bottom and froze. The room actually went quiet enough to hear the heat vents. What is this, Richard? Her chair scraped slightly as she shifted toward him. He set his glass down and forced a small, confused chuckle. Bank mix-up, they keep sending nonsense, I told them to stop. His hand twitched like he wanted to snatch the paper away. I pushed my phone closer on the table, screen still dark. It is not a mix-up, I heard the calls. Storage facility on the edge of town, unit number right there. I tapped the top corner of the sheet with one knuckle. They have an auction scheduled, which means they are done asking nicely. Every face turned toward me at once. A cousin put his fork down, untouched stuffing on his plate. My wife inhaled sharply, then gave me the smallest nod. We want to see it, I added the unit. You are not paying for an empty locker with a few boxes. Rick laughed again, louder this time, less human. You broke into my storage, do you hear yourself? He spread his hands as if that was the biggest crime here. My wife leaned forward, voice shaking but clear. We used the access code on the notice they mailed to our house. The word house landed like a stone. Because that was the part he could not dodge. E-bills followed him into our mailbox, not some old address. The debt collectors called our living room during my workday. His secret problem had walked straight into our space without knocking. My mother-in-law kept reading, lips thinning with every line. Months of missed payments, late charges added on, interest climbing. She hit the section about cutting his lock and auctioning contents. Her hand went to her chest, not for drama, just pure shock. You told me you had everything under control, she whispered. Rick bristled and reached for the statement. I slid it sideways out of his reach. You want control, let us talk about that. My hands finally stopped shaking as I opened my phone. I swiped to the first photo and set it in the center. The screen showed stacks of duplicate tools, unused appliances, random gear. I flicked to the next image, then the next. Rows of clothing with tags, electronics piled on each other, endless clutter. Gasps and low curses floated around the table, even from the quiet relatives. It looked worse on the screen than it had in person, which says a lot. That is not junk, those are investments. He pointed at the phone, voice jumping an octave. Market dipped, so I held on to things, that is how you do it. You buy low, you wait, you sell when the time is right. He latched onto that word sell like a lifeline he had invented. Investments that are about to be sold at auction for late rent. My wife's words hit harder than anything I had prepared. You have been paying to store duplicates and unopened stuff for years. Meanwhile, you unplugged our fridge to save on electricity. Her eyes were wet, but her voice no longer wobbled. One of my uncles spoke up, which I did not expect. How much are we talking here, really? I turned the statement toward him so the whole line could see. His eyebrows shot up and he let out a low whistle. That is more than some people owe on their whole car. Rick tried another angle, quick and defensive. It is my money, my responsibility, you kids spend way more. He jabbed a finger toward me, like I was the villain here. I kept my voice as even as I could manage. You turned our lives into a boot camp over bills and waste. I looked around the table, making myself hold their eyes. Timer notes in the bathroom, fridge unplugged without warning. Snooping through trash bags and rationing showers like we were kids. All while hiding this thing and ignoring calls we heard in the next room. You do not get to preach thrift while burning it in storage fees. He slammed his palm on the table hard enough to rattle silverware. I am trying to keep this family afloat, those are backup supplies. Everyone flinched except my wife's mother, who stayed locked on him. Backup for what, Richard? The end of the world. She sounded more tired than angry, which somehow cut deeper. You told me we could not afford a vacation for 10 years. She lifted the statement and shook it gently. Meanwhile, you funneled all that into a metal closet across town. Are there secrets inside there that I should know about? Or is it just mountains of things you could not stop buying? He opened his mouth, closed it, then threw his napkin onto his plate. You do not understand how hard I worked, how little we had. His voice dropped rougher, a little younger somehow. Stuff was the only way to feel secure, to feel prepared. He looked around, searching for someone to nod along. Nobody did. That is the part that hit him, I think. One cousin stared down at the table, jaw tight. Another relative shook his head slowly, like watching a slow accident. Even the kids in the other room had fallen strangely quiet. I am not saying your fear is fake. The words came out before I fully planned them. I get that you grew up counting every penny. I also get that it probably feels good seeing shelves full. But you aimed all that fear straight at us and called it guidance. He stared at me, eyes bright and unfocused. You waste money because you are soft, that is not fear. He tried to sound sure of that, but the edge was gone. Look at them, he added, sweeping his arm toward the younger faces. Buying coffee on apps, paying subscriptions for everything, never saving. My wife leaned in, elbows on the table now, shoulders squared. We save, we plan, we talk about money like adults. We actually check our numbers instead of shoving them in a locker. You want to call our generation careless, fine, say it. But then explain why your careful system ends with an auction notice. Her mother pressed 2 fingers to her temple and took a slow breath. How long have you hidden this from me, she asked. He looked down at his hands, beat, then shrugged one shoulder. Few years, started small, got away from me, I was going to fix it. The way he clipped the words told me he knew they sounded weak. You had 10 years to fix it. My mother-in-law's voice finally rose to match the moment. Instead you hid the L. Edders dodged calls, picked fights over light switches. She slid the business card from the facility across the table. The manager sent his contact, he remembers your account very clearly. The room buzzed with whispers low and sharp. One cousin murmured that he would never let it get that bad. Another aunt asked how many units there were, just one or more. Rick glared at me like I had exposed a crime to strangers. I stared right back because I was done shielding him. I will not have my kid grow up thinking this is normal. My voice came out louder now, and I did not pull it back. Normal is not living under sticky notes and secret debts. Normal is not blowing up dinners over thermostat settings. Then hiding a storage bill that could sink us all. So what, you throw me out onto the street? He pushed his chair back half an inch, testing the edge. Take your papers and your photos and toss the old man. Let your generation handle things without our wisdom. He spat out that last word like it tasted bad in his mouth. Nobody is throwing you out tonight. My wife put a flat hand on the table, fingers spread. But things change after this, starting now, not later. She looked from me to her mother, then back to him. We help you only if you stop lying and stop controlling every room. Her mother nodded slowly, like she was signing something big. First rule, no more secrets about money, not one. Every bill, every account, everything you are behind on goes on the table. We will look at it together, or you handle it alone in another house. Her bracelet clicked softly against the wood as she folded her hands. Second rule, no more lectures about how wasteful we are. I felt my shoulders loosen for the first time in months. Your choices are not shining examples right now, they are warnings. Until you clean this up, no more speeches about showers and takeout. You keep your comments to yourself or you find another audience. He stared at all 3 of us, like we had switched languages mid-meal. You cannot talk to me that way under my own roof. My wife gave a short, bitter laugh at that. Your roof, really? You live in our guest room. Our names are on the deed, our jobs pay the taxes and repairs. The words hung there heavy and obvious. You could almost hear them land on him in stages. His shoulders dropped a fraction, then his chin. He looked older in that moment than I had ever seen him. Not from years, from the weight of his own story cracking. So what now? He finally asked, voice quieter. You call that facility tomorrow, my wife answered. You arrange a payment plan that does not fall on us. You start selling whatever you can out of that unit. You cancel the junk and keep essentials with us checking in. And if I refuse? He looked up again, challenging, but the force was gone. Her mother spoke this time, eyes wet but steady. Then you attend that auction as a stranger and watch your things go. And you do it without dragging this house down while you fall. The table stayed silent, but the message was not subtle. He could either let us help with boundaries or keep sinking alone. For once, nobody jumped in to soften the edges. Not one person said calm down or think of his feelings. We had all lived under those feelings for too long already. I am not proud of what came next in my own head. I felt a small, ugly flicker of satisfaction watching him squirm. Like part of me enjoyed seeing the lectures bounce back for once. That part of me is not gracious, and I own that now. In the moment, though, it felt like balance finally showing up. Rick stood up and walked away from the table without another word. Chairs creaked as people shifted, unsure whether to follow. My wife squeezed my knee under the table so hard it almost hurt. Her mother stayed where she was, staring at the empty doorway. The rest of us just sat in that thick, awkward quiet. Eventually, the normal sounds of a holiday crept back in. Plates clinked, someone coughed, a kid in the next room laughed. Conversation restarted in cautious little bursts around the edges. But the center of the room, our little square, stayed tense. We had kicked open a door that was not going to shut again. Later that night, long after everyone left, he came to our doorway. He did not knock, just hovered in the hall like a ghost. I muted the TV and waited, hands folded on my lap. He stared past me at nothing, jaw working like he was chewing guilt. I thought he might yell or pack or pretend none of it happened. "You really went in there?" It came out almost as a whisper, almost to himself. "Yeah," I answered. We did not know what else to do. He nodded once, slow and uneven, like he had already assumed that. "Place looked bad, huh?" I could have punched down right there. I could have listed every stupid duplicate and unpaid bill. Instead, I just said, "It looked overwhelming for anyone." He blinked, surprised at the word anyone. Then he leaned his shoulder into the wall like he needed it. I lost track, he admitted. I kept thinking one more month. One more payment, one more sale, I would get ahead again. And every time I failed, I tightened up harder at home. He rubbed his forehead, fingers pressing deep grooves. "I thought if I controlled you too, at least something was in order. We are not your damage control." The sentence sounded softer than it reads now, but it stayed firm. "We care about you, but we will not live like that." He nodded again, eyes shining, then wiped them fast. "I hate that you saw that place, but maybe I needed it." The next week was messy, I will not lie. There were tears, more arguments, phone calls with that storage manager. He drove down there with my wife and started pulling things out. Some went online for sale, some straight into the dumpster. He raged at prices, then cried over objects, then kept going anyway. We did not rescue him by writing a big check. We covered 1 month to stop the auction clock on one condition. Every other payment came from selling what he had hoarded. He hated that at first, then started treating each sale like a small victory. I watched him let go of things he had gripped for years. The rules we laid out at that table stuck. Bills went into a shared folder on the counter, not his pocket. If he wanted advice, he asked, he did not lecture. The sticky notes disappeared from the bathroom mirror and light switches. The deadbolt on the garage door stopped clicking every time we walked by. He still slips sometimes. He will start in on how we order food after long work days. Then he catches my eye, remembers that sheet on the table. I can almost see the word storage auction flash behind his face. He shuts his mouth, picks up his glass, and lets the moment pass. I would love to tell you everything wrapped up neat after that dinner. It did not, of course. Real people do not flip like a switch. We still argue about money, about habits, about what matters. He still thinks we tap our phones too easily and trust credit too much. I still think he spends more on fear than he ever did on actual bills. But there is one difference that keeps me from losing it now. When he starts gearing up to bash my whole age group, I cut in. I remind him we have his numbers in writing and his unit on file. I remind him my generation helped drag his mess into daylight. He grumbles, backs off, and his voice comes out a lot quieter. And every time he mutters that his peers would never waste cash like we do. I picture that packed unit with duplicates stacked to the ceiling. I picture my wife holding that statement with shaking hands. And I remember that day at the table when we stopped being his audience. We started being the boundary he should have had decades ago, whether he liked it or not.